everyone. Welcome back to the second day of PRSE. I'm Beatriz Santos, the editor at Sustainable Plastics, the show's official publication. And today we're starting in the best possible way. We have a keynote session on fair competition as the foundation for a resilient European industry. And I dare say this is probably the most important topic at PRSE. So we have plenty of interesting discussions ahead of us. We're going to have 3 keynote speeches of 10 minutes each, roughly. And then at the end, we'll have the chance for a live Q&A. There's going to be a QR code on the screen. You can scan that with your phones and then write your questions on Slido. And at the end, I'll make sure to ask the questions out loud to our esteemed speakers. So the first speech will be by Virginia Jasons. She's the Managing Director at Plastics Europe, and she will be speaking about a level playing field for plastics, driving Europe's industrial resilience. Virginia will be followed by Eric De Hoek. He's the Managing Director at Eastman Circular Solutions Europe, and he will be discussing the EU circular plastics infrastructure, enabling sustainability targets and material supply security. And last but not least, we'll have Philip Liner, he's the CEO of Alpla, and he will be discussing 3 priorities for strengthening fair competitiveness and resilience for Europe's plastic packaging value chain. And as I said, at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So, Virginia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Ooh, no, whoopla. That starts, just a sec. I have to. Thank you for being here. I think you have my highest respect after the boat party to be here as early. I didn't expect a lot of people, but it's great to have some of you here at least. So my name is Virginia Janssens. I'm the Managing Director of Plastics Europe. We're an industry association, pan-European and based in Brussels. So we represent 90% of the polymer industry in Europe, and that gives us a foundation and some weight to talk to policymakers in terms of creating enabling frameworks for our industry and ecosystem across Europe towards the circular economy for plastics that we all want in this room, at least. Antonino, I saw you earlier. I'm not sure whether you're here, but I wanted to thank Antonino and the team for a great show for the 10th times. It's really impressive what you've done, and thank you very much for inviting me on the stage. And it's just also your presence as recycling. Some of the recycling leaders are here in the audience. Some are over there. You're innovators. And it's a statement as such. Sorry, this is killing me. It is a statement, this recycling show, because you're standing strong for Europe's recycling sector. You are taking on the challenges, and we have daily challenges. We have supply chain disruptions, price shocks, and many other uncertainties, and we've heard that from Ton yesterday morning as well, very clearly. And you are here to work together to make Europe's recycling sector resilient, right? So that's the statement. And that is also my call for us all today as the wider ecosystem, plastics ecosystem, to take, and I'm using the word ownership of our circular economy for plastics in Europe, again. I am saying this because the supply chain shocks we are experiencing from the Middle East conflict and in Ukraine are not temporary, they are structural. Rising geopolitical tensions, energy and feedstock volatility are no longer exceptions, they are becoming the norm. So we are looking at a fundamentally new reality for our industrial competitiveness in Europe. And in this new reality, feedstock certainty matters just as much as cost efficiency. So that's why Europe cannot afford to remain overly dependent on external resources. So if we want to regain strategic autonomy in Europe, a strong circular plastic system is not a nice to have, It is the answer, as many of us know in this conference. A strong circular plastics economy reduces our reliance on imported fossil feedstocks. A strong circular plastics economy limits our exposure to external disruptions. And a strong circular plastics economy secures access to the materials our strategic downstream industries depend on. We need to acknowledge the facts as they are. After years of rapid growth, Europe's circular plastics production is now stalling. It's a key trend you will find in Plastics Europe upcoming report. So it's called the Circular Economy for Plastics, a European analysis. We produce those every 2 years, so the next one is coming out mid-May, so in 2 weeks' time. And for the first time, our report investigates not only the trade flows of plastics in primary form, but also those of recycled plastics. We already knew that Europe's share of global plastics production has nearly halved in the past 20 years. So from 22% in 2006 to just 12%, 12% in 2024. Now it has become clear that Europe is increasingly outsourcing its circular economy. I'll repeat, because that's actually one of, I want you to remember a couple of things, and this is one, that Europe is increasingly outsourcing its circular economy, exporting significant volumes of its recyclable plastic waste, and then importing circular plastics. We are becoming increasingly dependent on imports, including for our circular materials. This is painful. So, in Europe, we are faced with plant closures and capacity reductions. We have it with the recyclers, but we also have it with the converters. We have it with our members as well, further upstream with the polymer producers. Industry turnover has dropped sharply from 457 billion to 398 billion in just 2 years. And this is capital that is no longer available to invest in European jobs. And with every lost job, we are losing innovation, we are losing talent, and in the end, people's hope and confidence in their future and the future of Europe. Meanwhile, in China, circular plastics production grew by about 45% in 2 years, and that's 22 to 24. In Europe, circular plastics account for roughly 15%, and the Commissioner Roswell already referred to our newest data yesterday. So it's 15% of production today, and that figure has barely progressed in recent years. So meanwhile, we still landfill or incinerate more than 70% of our plastic waste. I'm now coming with some answers, so that's a little bit the doom and gloom. I apologize, but it was needed. Circularity starts with a simple principle: keeping resources in Europe. It makes little sense to export valuable sorted waste and to increase imports of recycled materials. This undermines both our industrial base and our climate and circularity ambitions. We must treat waste as a strategic resource. We must ensure it is used within Europe to build a strong market for circular plastics. Because let us be clear, sorted waste is not waste. It is our feedstock, it is our stability, it is our autonomy, and it is the basis for resilient circular plastics markets. Circularity is also one of our most powerful levers for decarbonization. We cannot meet Europe's climate targets without scaling circular plastics. So the question is not whether we need circularity, the question is whether we are willing to own it again to make it happen on a broader scale. Europe can remain a front runner, but only if we choose to be strategic. This requires leadership, it requires vision, and above all, it requires us to think beyond just tomorrow. We need to think long term. It's not easy, as we all know. It's not easy in a commercial context. It's not easy in a political mandate context. But we need to. And this brings me back to today's core theme, fair competition as the foundation of a resilient European industry. We must build a level playing field. Imported plastics, including circular plastics, must meet equivalent EU standards. We must create transparency, and that includes strong mechanisms to distinguish between fossil-based and circular materials coming in to Europe. And Jessica Roswell is picking that up. There's work ongoing. And one of the reasons why this was successful in terms of being effectively heard by the European Commission and EU policymakers is that we teamed up. We teamed up with PRE for this, we teamed up with the converters, we teamed up as a value chain to really launch our strategic recommendations as a value chain, as a plastics value chain, and that is the most effective thing we can do in this regard. And it will, of course, the distinction between fossil and circular imports will also help us to track and be faster in terms of determining also dumping or other unfair practices. And we just need more data for that, more timely data. And this is also work that is now ongoing with the Commission and the customs at our borders, basically. And one of it is also increased capacity that for sure will be needed to make sure that we measure much more and track much more what's coming in before damage is done. It doesn't help if we already closed shop and then come with the data. Let me also say this, we do not have the luxury of just pointing to policymakers to create a level playing field. I already hinted at it before. Of course, we need that enabling framework, we need the enforcement, and policymakers need to work with us hand in hand, but we also must team up as a value chain. No single player can solve this alone. So I'm talking about us, polymer producers, converters, brands, recyclers, along our value chain, we're all part of the same ecosystem. Departures at one stage of the supply chain will lead to departures somewhere else, up or downstream. So our challenges, but also our success is interconnected. And if we work together, we can turn the tide. And this crisis is not the time for finger pointing or becoming cynical. It is a time to focus on what unites us. And we already have the foundations. We have done it before many times. We are doing it. I think, Antonino, if you can nod, that we are teaming up in many ways, on many topics. We have aligned positions. We've got the policy vehicles. Commissioner Roswell hinted at it yesterday as well. We have the Circular Plastics Alliance. We've got the Critical Chemicals Alliance. We need to leverage those alliances. The Commission is helping industry with shaping, with offering a framework, a platform to work as a value chain to help our industry and our circular economy for plastics. So let us use those platforms to align on bold action. So let us lean in and let us take responsibility. Let us take ownership of our circular economy in and for Europe. Just as a reminder, at Plastics Europe, we call that future our plastics transition roadmap towards 2050. We've launched it in 23. It is still our North Star. A Europe where we have some milestones in there. A Europe where 65% of plastics are circular. 65. A Europe with a net zero emissions plastic system. A Europe that reuses and recycles its waste instead of exporting, incinerating or landfilling. A Europe that builds strategic autonomy by turning homegrown waste into valuable resources. So if you share this vision for Europe, then I invite you all, recyclers, value chain partners, innovators, leaders, policymakers to team up and make it a reality. And I just want to end as well, it's not just all those choices we are making, it's not just about plastics or even circularity, it's about the kind of society we want to build, it's about the environment we protect for our children, and about Europe's future, Europe's prosperity, and Europe's place in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. And now we move on to Eric's presentation.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. First, I'd like to start by saying thank you to the organizer, PRE, the PRSE team. I don't know about you, but really every year when I come here, I really feel energized, and I'm happy to see all the energy that we have in this industry, trying to develop this circular economy, this recycling industry. I think we can all recognize that we are not lacking challenges on the way. Could be geopolitical challenges, you've mentioned that. It could be regulatory challenges. But I really feel that we need to have this energy in order to build this beautiful project, which consists in creating a circular economy. Probably, Europe today is the #1 place in the world where we have this potential to truly create a circular economy, and to really truly take and see the value that there is in the waste, which is a resource, and recycle it to make it a new raw material for all the products that we are using in our daily life. So I am Eric De Hoek. I am the managing director for Eastman Circular Platform in Europe. Very few words on who is Eastman. Most of you might know Eastman Kodak from the previous time. The companies was doing the camera and the film. And it turns out that our story about circularity started back in the 70s, actually, almost 50 years ago from now, because at the time, we created a process, which is the methanolysis process, and that the concept of that process was to recycle the film on which we were using to develop the picture. And the goal at the time wasn't to really recycle the plastic of the film, it was to recycle that in order to recover the copper inside the film, and to recycle this copper in future film. And a few years ago, actually 10 years ago, we looked back at our portfolio of technology, and we realized that, hey, look, this process in reality could recycle PET and works very well to recycle PET. And especially when we take hard to recycle PET, that would be otherwise landfilled or incinerated, and we can bring it back to a virgin quality. Actually, chemically, you cannot make any difference with the recycled plastic that we're producing compared to a virgin PET. So this is where we are coming from. And as a company, we are an American-based company. We did a big investment in the US, but we really believe in local circular economy. And we've announced several times that we really want to invest, and more than €1 billion actually investment in Europe in order to create this circular economy. We do that, we believe that because two things. First, we believe that a circular economy has to be local. So this is why it makes sense to be in the US, it makes sense to be in Europe, and to have an asset in Europe to take the EU waste, recycle it, and sell it back on the European market. So we believe into the regionality aspect of this economy, of this circular economy. And we also believe about the fact that we should take what is otherwise today not recyclable, what we call the hard to recycle, and that would be otherwise incinerated and landfilled, and offer to the market a technology that can take that feedstock and that waste and bring it back to a virgin quality polymer. But in order to do that, we need to have an industry in Europe. We still believe that Europe can lead this circular economy, but we need to have a strong industry in Europe. We need you guys here, to be successful in building this industry. And we've seen a lot of challenge on the way in the past few years because of the uncertainty on regulation, because of the geopolitical situation, because of imports against which it is very difficult to compete. So, and it brings us to the question, what is, fair competition in this market? Because we need to have a fair competition, otherwise we just can't compete, and otherwise I think the plastic recycling industry in Europe is going to be pretty much destroyed, and everything will be imported from outside of Europe, where the cost base is much better than what we can find in Europe. So what does it take to build this fair competition? Well, I think it's fairly simple actually, and the idea I want to share with you is fairly simple. We need to play by the same rules to some extent. And what are the rules for the circular economy that we are playing in? First, it's make sure that we are having the same, type of collection, separate collection, number one. Number two is making sure that we have the same recycling rate target. Number three, making sure that we have the same recycling content incorporation target. Number three, making sure that the quality required for food contact are the same within the market where you are playing with. And if you don't have the same rules, in order to compete in this market, we cannot compete against a country, for instance, where, the waste over there is not even recycled, where there is not even a recycling industry, where they not even use the recycled content back to food grade and compete against that level of cost structure in Europe. That will not work. We know that at the end, we are going to lose this industry. We are going to not to be able to compete with the European industry. So, in order to achieve that, another point which is, I think, a very important point, we need to go back to what is, what was the main objective at the beginning, and that should still be the main objective. We want to recycle our waste, right? We want to recycle our own waste. We have this, accountability that we have for ourselves, for, our peers and our next generation to say, I want to recycle the waste that I'm producing myself. And I believe that Europe, as a target, should first decide to recycle the European waste. Make sure that we have, at the top of what we can do to recycle this waste. And then, if we have recycled all our waste and we have produced all the resources out of this waste in order to reincorporate that in our product, that's fine, to help, some other places in the world to recycle their waste. In all the debates we're having right now, and with the EU Commission, with a number of trade associations, we are talking a lot about, free trade. It's very interesting to realize that, when we want to be honest with ourselves and we want to make a step back, when we have a competitive advantage, we want free trade and we talk a lot about free trade, but when sometimes we feel and we believe that we have a little bit of a lack of competitive advantage, we are asking for fair competition, and if we really don't have a competitive advantage, usually we are asking for closing the borders. So sometimes, the free trade concept has some variable geometry. But what I think is important here, in order to avoid to polarize the debate around free trade or not free trade, and sometimes, we have questions, are you for free trade? No. So no, that's not the question. If we look back, actually, free trade, the concept of free trade, the GATT agreement, were developed in it was in 1947. And it was applied by 28 countries, I think, in 1948. The OECD actually agreement were defined and signed by pretty much the same country, a little bit more, actually a little bit over 30 countries, in 1995. And you know what? At the time, pretty much, very few people were talking about circular economy. So I think that what we are doing as, players and active players in this industry, we are improving, the definition of what is free trade, what is, the pure sense of commerce. We are improving this definition, and we are trying to find a way to include the circular economy in the way we are doing this free trade. Last but not least, actually, I'd like to conclude by saying, hey, I think that we are right now privileged, all of us, wherever we are in the value chain, to work at a time where we are at the crossroads of so many challenges and so many challenges and difficult situations. We are at the crossroads of the energy transition. We are at the crossroads of the chemical industry future in Europe. We are at the crossroads of what it takes to have access to raw materials in Europe. We are at the crossroads of what it takes to have resilience in our value chain. So it is a lot of challenge. But I think that it is a privilege to be able to do that. I think it's very inspiring for us as leaders and for all the people of our companies to have the chance to do that. And I really believe that as companies investing in Europe, we have the chance to lead the way and show how to create really circular economy. So be foolish, don't give up, continue to have this desire to create this circular economy, because I think this is the sense of history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. And finally, Philip, the floor is yours.
Once upon a time, in a town in a very distant land, but a very pretty town, there was a piper. And that piper had a flute. And with that flute, he made beautiful music. So beautiful that all kids of that town followed the piper wherever he went. And went he did. He walked around town, and at some point he left town. and he walked out into the mountains to disappear with the kids to never be seen again. Now, I do tell that story to my kids every once in a while. They love their stories at bedtime. And every time I read that story, it reminds me of the talk that we've had for the last 10 years, coming from Brussels and other capitals of Europe, where there was talk of the strategic roadmap for Europe, the Green Deal and all of the incumbent or associated topics, including the recycling strategy and how recycling is important for the industrial future of Europe. And we did listen as an industry. No, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we did listen and we invested in technology, we built capabilities, and we installed capacities. We did that. And we're ready to roll. And yet, it is a very difficult time. I think nobody here is like, popping champagne on a weekly basis. That is not quite what is happening, but we're struggling day in and day out to make that vision of that famous piper a reality. Demand's down because, of course, difficult macroeconomic setting, but demand's also down because we invite import competition to enter freely. And they come in with a different set of costs, and they squeeze local producers in a competitive battle. And, of course, we also have rules ever changing. We have legal texts that nobody can really say what they mean. We have changing requirements. We have paths forward that are drawn back a couple of years later. All of this to say, or resulting in a very uncertain picture and time for us to operate in. And that is a tough one. Very, very tough one. And so if we don't want us as a recycling industry, in the packaging space in particular, but I would assume that it goes beyond, not to disappear behind that famous mountain, we need to change something. And we need to change it fast. It's not 5 minutes to 12, it's 1 minute to 12. And so action is required. I'm Philip Lean, I'm the CEO of the Alpla Group. Who doesn't know us? We're a designer, producer, and recycler of rigid plastic packaging solutions, operating globally, but headquartered and homed in Austria at Lake Constance. I'm making this point today because I have one message for everyone here. I don't need to tell you how difficult it is and how it would be great if we all took ownership and went forward in one step and believed in the future. I want you to leave with one thought, and there's a call to action. We're not going to quite stir up the revolution, but I want you to go out and advocate for that original vision that politicians, Brussels, and all the other capitals put forth in front of us, and we followed because it was a beautiful tune, and we all love it. Who doesn't love circularity? Who doesn't love the idea that there's no waste of resources? And we've put our minds and money behind that vision. And we are ready to execute. But we need the basis to do it and to do it well. So what I want to leave you with here today is a call to action to talk to your local politicians and tell them what is going on. Tell them we need support and we finally need some political leadership to see through that beautiful concept of what was claimed to be that famous Green Deal with all its implications particularly. And everyone will have his own little concerns, sub-concerns amongst, but the recycling of packaging waste. And so while this is the call to action, while this is a call to action, I know everyone here has heard these points 10,000 times, but you just remember, call to action, talk to your local politicians. And here's 3 things I want to leave you with very briefly only, as things that we need to address, or we can use to address those mentioned pipers, to have that conversation why we need to change things, and we need to do it swiftly. Number 1, level playing field, we heard it before. If we want to drive outcomes, specific outcomes, we need to decide what outcomes we seek, and then we find a way to, without preconditions or pre-notions, allow allow the market to deliver to the best of its ability to those outcomes. And part of that is a material neutral design of regulations, defining only the outcome that we seek. If we seek affordability, that's one piece. That's normally what the market does well anyways. Number two, if we seek sustainability, emissions, for example, one of those beautiful words that is very seldomly designed what it actually means, but if we use emissions, then that is one outcome that we seek, and we can organize against that. But level play field, very important. Without level play field, we simply have another tax, okay? But no steering element, no element to drive outcomes and seek focus across industry. Number two, very important, closing the gap. It's one of those truths that we very rarely talk about, and I'm talking about the packaging industry for consumer goods, liquid consumer goods. If we go the PCR route, it will cost extra, okay? I don't need Brussels or any other politician to tell me that I should invest into a new air compressor, because I know I have a payback of 3 to 4 years, every 15 to 20 years. I don't need regulation for this. I need regulation, I need solid one, if they want me to invest things that drive market prices up. And if we talk PCR, be that beverage or any other rigid packaging application for liquids, there is an extra cost. There's a structural gap of around 250 to 300 euros if we look at average pricing over time. And that doesn't sell itself, okay? So we need a solid foundation of a legal framework that allows folks to put minds and money to work to operate successfully and in a thriving way over time. And so closing that gap between fossil plastics and post-consumer recycling is important. It's essential, to say the least. There are some good examples where governments and regulators in European countries put a direct link between using circular products or content, be that PCR content of, I don't know, 10, 20, 30%, and give them an incentive to do so, and with that closing the gap. There's good examples in the UK, there's good examples in France and in Spain, to mention a few at least. And that has been a way to tackle, but it's important to close that gap, and it needs to be done with some sort of levy system in order to incentivize industry to come along. It's an inconvenient truth, but it's very much a true truth, and we need to focus on it, and we need to do it fast. Because again, if not, we will disappear behind the mountain. And so we need to talk to decision makers about this. And then lastly, a very important point, and I feel like Europe is so timid that we keep on dropping that discussion point over and over again. We need PCR made from Europe, in Europe. That needs to be the focus. It was mentioned by a previous speaker, and it's a very important point. Naturally, the whole world wants to sell into Europe because the pricing here is amongst the highest in the world. And naturally, we're also the most open market in this regard. So naturally, a lot of folks will come in, but we should not forget that folks outside of Europe play with a different set of rule games. Whether it's on the E from ESG, environmental requirements, whether it's on the S from ESG, whether it's social, and then the G I would change for C, costing, because they come in at a very different costing game. And with that, the competition is not fair, and that was the original point I wanted to talk to you about. We need fairer competition, and with that, we need to, from a policy perspective, implement the Made in Europe, for Europe aspect fast. Now, there's been a little bit of progress, kind of half a step forward that has happened with the winter package coming out of Brussels, but it has an expiry date in 2027. winter package, basically saying that for rigid applications, material from Europe needs to be preferred. But what happens after 2027? Policymakers talk about mirror clauses, which I don't even know how to express my confusion with that idea. That you say, hey, we have rules in Europe, pretty please in Vietnam, could you stick to those rules? Has that ever worked? No, it hasn't. It won't happen in this case. So the illusion of thinking that a mirror clause is actually going to be effective in any sense is very disappointing, to say the least. Now, good news is we spoke to the governor, to the commissioner yesterday. She understands that the effectiveness is limited, and she said she will look into ways to strengthen the idea, which hopefully means demolish that idea and come up with a new one. But that's what needs to happen, because the mirror clause will not solve a problem at all. It creates another one. Because how do you want to control tens of thousands of suppliers across global supply chains with an auditing system? Impossible. And it's important because, and I would agree with the previous speaker, if we don't act, the industrial base is at risk. And with that, there's a whole set of questions that are about to pop up. How will we handle, if we assume we continue the living standard that we have, how would the consumption levels that go with it? How would we handle the waste that is created through that living standard? If we don't have the capacity and the industrial base, we'll have to go back into landfill, or we'll have to go back into export. Both of which, by the way, export's becoming harder because also countries that used to be in that business are closing the doors on those ideas. And so next thing you know, we need to shoot the whole thing to the moon, hoping that they take it. Okay, so there's real practical limits along the way that we need to be aware of. And so one of the solutions for that piece, we spoke about, or we heard about solutions before, is the question, how do we make sure that Europe for Europe is becoming a real thing? Mirror clause won't get us there. There's some ideas that European content first, okay, I'm not quite sure how to implement this. I think the simplest way, and we should never forget, when we do policy, it needs to be simple. Anyone that runs a business here, or a team, knows the simpler the rules, the easier it is to get everyone behind it. The simplest rule will be tariffs, full stop. Not to keep all out, but to dose what comes in. Simplest, cleanest way to do it. And I hope Europe starts to learn from the rest of the world. We're going to talk about what the rest of the world does here in a second. Because most markets, most big markets are going that way. That they say, hey, it's strategically important that we take care of our waste. And only then, okay, I'm over time, great, thank you. That's why it would have been great to have to watch. I have that tendency. But we need to make sure that we look out for ourselves, and tariffs will be the easiest, cleanest way to align everyone behind that goal. And last but not least, or very last, here's just a quick map of where everyone thinks about regulatory changes. Many of them include country waste for country first. Prominent example being India, another one being China, okay, the great exporter of PCR. You don't get PCR into China if you want to get it in. They are smart about it. Just about time for us to get smart too. And then lastly, we spoke about a push towards politicians through advocacy. That would be my call to action for you. Here would be a second call. This is a push towards consumer. If you ask yourself what this little guy does, this is Captain Plasto, which is the mascot of the Plastic is Fantastic Foundation, which is an advocacy group that speaks directly to consumer on behalf of our industry to make sure that consumer gets facts and figures that are not greenwashed or green politically washed before they reach them, okay? Anyone's interested and haven't heard about us, do reach out. Happy to have a chat, and if anyone wants to join, we're always free for other freedom fighters. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. We got a bedtime story and a call for revolution in one speech. So, thank you. So we have around 4 minutes for questions now. Please keep them going. First one, we have quite a few here about action, but when? People are asking, what can be done now and not in 6 months, say. So for example, you mentioned that Commissioner Oswald yesterday was mentioning perhaps this option of not having mirror clauses in the PPWR anymore, perhaps having Europe-only recyclates as we saw in the SUPD implementing act. What do you think might happen within the next 6 months, which for politicians is what is called now? Philip.
Well, maybe number one, she didn't say she's going to rid of the mirror clause, but she knows about its limitations, which was a good first step, I think. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I do think, though, that politician Roswell understands that there is a dying streak of recycling operations, and she knows that once that industrial base is gone, it will not come back. And she wants to have that industrial base to execute the circularity vision. Let's see how fast we can actually turn it around. I'm not sure whether it will be within 6 months, but hopefully short thereafter.
Yeah. The Circular Economy Act is coming in the autumn, so we'll have more details then. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, but maybe to answer your question as well. I mean, let's be true to ourselves. Let's be pragmatic. I think that we've been talking about this circular economy for years now. We have invested in this space for years now. We cannot sustain those investments, in the air like that during, much more time. We cannot compete against, who we are competing with, for years actually. So my belief is that I think we have, really two options in front of us. Option one, in 26, the EU Commission sent a very clear message to the market, which consists in saying, we believe in the circular economy, we believe in the European circular economy, and it has to be EU waste, recycled in EU. And then I think you create the conditions to further invest and to further develop this circular economy. Or option two, we stay vague, we are late in the way this has to be applied, the criteria are gray, and we don't really know how this is going to fly. I think this entire industry is going to suffer and disappear potentially, because we are going to stop investing, and we are just going to import, because it's cheaper.
Virginia, do you want to jump in?
No, I just wanted to say, EU legislation and an enabling policy framework, the creation of that, it takes time. And that's the pro and cons of the European Union. I think we've got some, in terms of creating the demand, we've got some targets for 2030, and it has cost us blood, sweat and tears to get those targets, so at least we've got a trajectory there. And then in the immediate, there are the platforms that the Commission has created. So to Philip and Eric's points, they get it, huh? They get the urgency. The platforms are there now, so please team up with your associations, whether it's national or European. We're at a pivotal point, and we can really steer it all together as well. The platforms, Circular Plastics Alliance, the Critical Chemical Alliance, legislation, the Circular Economy Act, it's happening now. So I think if we can again team up as a value chain, we can steer the direction in the short term, but also longer term. Yeah.
And very shortly on price, Philip, you mentioned that tariffs could perhaps be a good way of closing the gap between virgin and recyclates. We have quite a few people here in the questions asking, would closing the market, so to speak, to European recyclates, would that be considered fair competition? Maybe the three of you can very shortly say your thoughts on that. Maybe Philip, you can begin.
It wouldn't be about closing. It would be about leveling the play field when it comes to the social conditions, environmental conditions, and costing structures. And if you add a 20-30% tariff, imports would still come in, but you would create a economical base where local producers could survive to some degree. And that would be the goal, to not lose the industrial base.
Adding to that, the other mechanisms are the demand, creating the demand pool. So it's the targets, of course, for sure, but then the second element, which we all find is a good measure, is looking at those extended producer responsibility schemes and what the bonus-malus system So it's a market-based instrument to create also a pool and an economic incentive to use more recycled content. Of course, there's also in the making of linking it to the EU preference, etc. But that is also a very good market-based instrument to stimulate that demand, and that will also help with the price gap.
I mean, personally, I'm not a big fan of increasing tariff, because you are just increasing the cost base, and the money is not going back to the industry. So what's the? I mean, it's not really useful actually on the long term. What I think the way we should think through that question is to say, hey, how should we consider the price of virgins so this price is integrating the full cost of the life cycle of the product? And then if we start to think this way, then we are going to realize that actually, we have one product basically on the market where you have the cost of the virgin, you have the cost of recycling this product, and this is the market you have, right?
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your contributions. We had plenty more questions, but we are out of time. Apologies. Our speakers will still be here for a little while. Thank you very much for your incredible contribution.
Thank you.